Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Mystic Podcast with Christina Bloom. How's everybody doing today? It's an early morning for me. I'm, I'm such a night person, but I would like to introduce you to my guest, Stephen Pomeroy, and I got a little background information on him I'd like to share with you. Oh, that is the wrong button. See, bloopers. So here we go. So, Stephen Pomeroy is a podcaster, entrepreneur, and content creator who loves bringing the past to life. He's the creator and host of Viking Legacy and Lore podcast, which is launching on April 29th of this year, where he takes a deep dive into the fascinating world of Viking history, culture, and mythology. Stephen's career started in business, where he successfully launched, built, and sold multiple companies. His background in ancient history and world religions even led him to teach at his alma mater. But things got personal when his aunt's family tree revealed that his ancestry traces directly back to Viking warriors. That discovery sparked a personal quest to uncover the secrets of the Norse past. For Stephen, Viking history isn't just about facts and stories, it's a journey of self discovery, helping him uncover his own identity, potential, and purpose. Fun fact: Stephen's direct Viking ancestry gives his stories a rare personal touch and authenticity. You can join the journey and follow Stephen on Instagram, Discord, Facebook, and TikTok at Village Legacy and Lore and on X at Norse Legacy.
All
So,
right.
how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing great. This is exciting. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, I'm so glad that you agreed to do this. This is fun because I'm also interested in Norse history, just not enough to really dive into it amongst all my other divings into with, the
Yeah,
paranormal and all. But
sure.
what got you interested in Norse
Yeah,
history?
so I mean, it's kind of you touched on it, but in I've always loved Vikings and history in general. So I love ancient history and medieval history and all that. But an aunt did a genealogy, and I'd known that the Pomeroy name, it came from Normandy, and there were some different theories as to what the Pomeroy name meant, and then she did a genealogy, she did a family tree, and turns out that tree goes way back, and then it goes back even further. So the origin of the Pomeroy name, where it came from, and then even our ancestry all the way back to Norway, and so from Norway to Normandy, and then from there over to the United States. But yeah, so it was fascinating, and then to see that there's crossover with historical figures, kings, and significant Vikings was like, whoa, this is what is this? So I've got to dig into this a little bit, and then it started with just listening to an audio book while I was running about Norse history, and I thought, man, there's a lot to this, so I'm just gonna explore it and use my discipline the way I have for other historical groups, and yeah, and so I've been enjoying it, and I thought, it'd be really neat to communicate this in a fun, engaging way, and so that's what led to the podcast.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
That is quite a journey to get there.
yeah, yeah. Well, and the other thing I love about it is it is a little bit of self discovery at the same time.
Hmm.
So researching and learning about ancient history, Babylonians, Assyrians, people groups like that. It is fascinating, and it's very fascinating to see how there are elements of those empires and those civilizations that are still in our world today.
Hmm.
Uh, but then to know that you have a connection, a direct connection to it,
Right.
is different. And so then all of a sudden it becomes a little more personal, and like, oh, so these things, these are like, hey, if it's passed on, it's in the bloodline. And so I love that part of it.
That is really cool. So, knowing that you're related through the line to Vikings and leaders and kings. Does it kind of make you step it up a bit?
Yeah, I think it does a little bit. A little bit. It's like you got those ancestors looking over your shoulder like, "Hey, what are you doing?" Let's
Uh-huh.
get with the program.
No
So, yeah,
slacking, buddy. Get
that's right.
moving.
That's right.
That's pretty cool, though, to learn that about your own ancestry and to really have connection to that, to really feel connection to that.
Yeah,
That's awesome. I know I have that with, I mentioned when we were off camera that I have Norse ancestry, but I also have multiple other ancestries,
sure. Sure.
you know,
Yeah, and
and
that's how it is for I think most of us. My
yeah,
mother's side would be the English side, but even then, that's English are mixed with the Vikings because you learn about the history and the migration of how the Vikings came from the north and settled and well raided in England and multiple attempts to take over
right.
England, but it wasn't until after they settled in Normandy that William the Conqueror from Normandy went over and then became the first king of England.
Yeah. And it all ties together,
Yeah,
doesn't it? It's like
yeah,
we keep trying to separate ourselves out into different little categories, but really it all meshes together
it
eventually.
does eventually. Yeah.
It just meshes. I think we go with just maybe what we feel drawn to, you know?
Yeah, that could be. Yep.
Yeah. And I mentioned the other podcast that I have, Red Road Paranormal, that investigates Native American legends and lore and, well, in the paranormal aspect as well. And I know there's a lot of paranormal also with the Viking as well.
A ton. Yes.
Tons of it. But it's because I embrace that part of my lineage with the studying the ancestry of the Native Americans. So
Yeah.
you embraced the Norse, and I love that. So talk to me about the paranormal aspect. What do you know
Okay.
about that?
Yeah, so it's one of those things. Where do you start? Because the Vikings and their history is rooted in. I mean, it's just like it's hard to get away from the mythology. It was such a part of their life, and I mean, we could do deep dives even into the psychological elements of what that produced. And some people would even say that they were such fierce warriors because of their belief in the paranormal, the afterlife, the gods and the mythology of things. But there are some fascinating stories in the sagas. So a saga is basically a story that would have been passed down orally. The Vikings had an oral tradition, so there's not a lot written until later on. So if you think Viking age, starting sometime in the 700s to the 1100s, 1300s, in there, but as it in that later stage, it starts to transition and start to lose the identity of Viking because the world just kind of starts to mix a little bit more. But things weren't written down until the 1300s, and so you're talking, a few hundred years after. So a lot of these things are oral stories. But then were written down in a saga. And so a saga
Mhm.
is just a way to say this is a Viking story. And then there are poetic books as well, where we get a lot of our information about Norse mythology. But one of the most fascinating things that I've discovered is their belief in let's see, how do we say it? Um, After a person dies, that when they're buried, there's a good chance if they didn't end up in Valhalla or in hell, which was spelled Hel, so a little bit different than what we think of hell today.
Mhm.
Um, as the Christian would propose it. So different type of place, more of a shadowy realm, cold air, cold place that you would be just forgotten about, type of thing. So um, so most of us think of two places, you go there or there, but the Vikings, it wasn't like that. There was a good chance that you would actually come back from the dead and roam the earth. Okay.
Oh.
And so if you did, then you would be what they called a drogger. Okay. What's fascinating about droggers are they are the Viking version of a zombie. So Vikings had zombies before zombies became a thing.
I
before they
was
were
afraid to say
popular.
that. I thought it'd
Yeah,
be
before they were
disrespectful.
popular in pop culture, zombies were like the original zombie hunters. So, but
Wow.
basically,
Okay, good to know.
yeah, yeah. So they believed in these draugrs that it would is basically a person that died that didn't go to Valhalla or hell or the shore of the corpses or whatever different places you could go, and they would rise and then they would torment the people around them, or sometimes they were just confined to their burial site, so they would torment anybody that was, a grave robber that was trying to steal from the grave or disturb the dead. And so there's some pretty fascinating stories in the sagas about these draugr. And the thing about
Yeah.
draugrs in the paranormal sense is they are not like our modern uh, uh, ghosts where they're not physical in nature, right?
Hmm.
Draugr were physical, and they oftentimes were stronger than normal humans.
Oh, yeah,
So
yeah. Okay.
yeah, so like a zombie, have flesh and bone, and but stronger and sometimes bigger, and then harder to kill as well. So, and you had to go through special practices in order to kill these things. So, you were trying to remove heads or limbs in order to get rid of a draugr if one was haunting your farm or your village or what have you. And so, what that did was it led to into their actually affected the way that they buried people. And so, because of this paranormal activity that happened around the dead, they decided to take measures into their own hands, and they would bury a body and they would stake the body to the ground with iron. They believed
Wow.
that iron
Okay.
had some kind of mystical power or what have you, and so they'd stake it to the ground, or they would decapitate dead people so that they didn't have a head, so they couldn't rise again, or they would chain their
Okay.
legs to the ground. And then they would also sometimes they would bury them with all of their treasure, thinking, okay, well, here you go, you've got enough, so don't come back and haunt us, you've got everything you need in your grave, that type of thing. So it led to their beliefs led to them doing things to prepare the dead for being dead for a long time or forever, and not come back and haunt them.
Wow.
Yeah.
What comes to mind, and I don't know if I picked this up in a movie or a book somewhere, um, where the body is like wrapped up and sent out on a raft and set on fire.
Yeah, so similar thinking. It's to basically send the dead off effectively, ensuring that they don't come back. And that specific ceremony would have been more reserved for the king or the a high the village jarl or whoever, somebody that was of significance.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I didn't imagine that. That's good to
No,
know.
no, no,
All
no.
right.
That's the thing. Yeah, for
It's a
sure.
thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you started talking about draugrs,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh. I mean, like regular zombies are bad enough, but
Oh yeah.
Viking zombies? Oh my
Yeah.
God.
That are strong, have swords, and can crush you. Yes, yes. Yeah, even
Oh
more.
my gosh. But are they mindless like what we think of as zombies?
No. So they were depicted as a Viking. So in one specific saga, and maybe I'll get to it and tell a little bit of that story, but it was a Viking that was a rebel. He didn't care about the traditions of the Norse. He just, forget all that. I don't believe in your gods. I don't believe in your traditions. I'm not going to celebrate your holidays. And then he's the one that dies, and he comes back as a draugr. So he's full of rage and anger, and his basically after death, his mission is to torment as many people as he can,
Oh wow.
and basically curse this village where he resides.
That's terrifying. I mean, I'm thinking of some of my ancestors that I know. I'm thinking, wow, I hope that that's not the case.
Well, you better make sure you stake them to the ground, I guess.
Well, or cremated. So,
Yeah, well, that was a thing. So,
mhm.
um, even getting rid of a Draugr, if one popped up in your village and somebody was brave enough to go out and fight them, the way to get rid of them oftentimes was to burn them, because then their ashes, they wouldn't be able to come back to life.
Right. They wouldn't be able to reassemble, so to
Yep.
speak.
Yep.
Okay. All right. And I'm really interested in all of this lore and legend stuff because it's fascinating. I've not heard a lot of this.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's, yeah, as you dig into it, it's pretty wild. It's awesome.
Okay, so then what comes to mind after that for me is, are there other like types of ghosts or types of spirits that
Yeah. So, yes, so that's one element. The Vikings also believed in spirit animals, so you have, that element of things.
Mhm.
Valkyries, which that's going to be one of the first 5 episodes that we launch, is going to be
Awesome.
talking about, well, one about Draugrs, and then there's a second one about Valkyries, and then we'll get into other stuff about military tactics and things like that, just to show a variety from the beginning, that we're going to cover all these things. But Valkyries would at times appear to warriors before they would go to battle, and then definitely they would appear to warriors as they are fallen in battle. And so,
Okay.
so they're a big part of what motivated warriors as they went into battle. These Valkyrie.
Okay. And what could you describe what a Valkyrie is?
Yeah. So if you know anything about Valkyrie, most of the time in our modern age, we would think of them like angels, almost like
Okay.
they're, light creatures, beautiful creatures from heaven, and they're coming to take the dead to heaven, right? And that's how we start to picture them, and that's not always what they were. Again, that's where you see in when Christianity came to the north, to Iceland, and really, I mean, the Vikings, they converted in mass. I mean, just there was almost no resistance, is what it looks like.
Hmm.
And so that's where I think that some of those Christian elements kind of shifted into their
Okay.
lore. But if you dig into the sagas and you dig in, you'll find that it's not completely like that. So a Valkyrie was a being, typically female, sent from Odin, right? So Odin is the All Father. He's most of the time seen as the chief god. Um, and so that he would send the Valkyries to the battlefield where men had died, and then they would collect the bravest of the warriors and bring them to Valhalla, to the hall where they would feast, and then they would continue to fight in Valhalla, and then rise again every day, and repeat the process. And that whole thing, not to get too much into the lore and mythology side of it, but that was to prepare for Ragnarok, and that's where that's the judgment of the gods ultimately. And so Odin was developing an army of warriors in order to fight at this final battle of Ragnarok, where the gods, Odin included, are judged. And so, that's a completely different deep dive to go into. But
Right.
back to Valkyries. And so Valkyries have an interesting part in Viking history, because they were seen as the choosers of who would die in battle. They were
Oh,
even seen as those who orchestrated the who would win the battle or who would lose. So, so that meant that if you were going to go to Valhalla, if a Valkyrie was going to choose you, you had to not just die in battle, but you had to die worthy in battle. And
oh
so you'll
wow. Okay.
see you'll see that theme. That theme you'll see in different Viking movies
Hmm.
or TV series, where a Viking, he panics when he's about to die in a way that's not brave, or without a sword in his hand. Give me a sword. I want to die with a sword in my hand. And that goes back to, they want to die in a brave way so that they can be taken by a Valkyrie to Valhalla. But so that being said, and to kind of go back into the paranormal side of it, in not just the lore, warriors would describe seeing Valkyrie before battle. And so there's one saga that actually talks about this, and this is where, to kind of balance out the angel side of things. Well, these
Uh-huh.
Valkyrie that they see before the battle are weaving a tapestry, like in a loom, right? But this
Okay.
loom is made out of human bones.
Oh, lovely.
And the loom is being woven with human entrails.
Oh,
So
even more lovely.
even more. And you're like, what? This is blowing away my preconceived idea of what I thought a Valkyrie was. And so that's what I love, that there is so much in the Viking history that you can just learn and go, well, I I never knew that, but that's yeah, pretty amazing. But in that vision that they would see before battle, oftentimes was an omen that that they, again, would have to fight bravely in order to be worthy. And most of the time, as battles go, most of those men wouldn't live to tell the story. But obviously, some must have, because the story gets passed on
Right.
to us. Yeah,
Yeah, obviously someone lived to tell the story.
yeah.
That- Wow. Um, I had a thought and then I got waylaid by the human entrails and weaving.
Well, I did too the first time. Now I love telling people.
Wow. Kind of just stopped my thought process right there.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Um, I have not known a lot about Norse history. I mean, my dad is Norwegian and Jewish, I believe. So, there was some that got passed down, but not a lot. It was more like, I don't know, just Norwegians are better than Swedes or something. I don't know, something. Well,
Yeah.
my mom was Swedish, so, there was that battle the whole time. But yeah, it's just interesting to me. The few things that I've learned about Norse has been through different pagan groups,
Mm,
actually.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
I have a friend who has a cat named Ragnarok.
Oh, all right. Nice. That's a good name for a cat. It's
You
probably,
know,
hopefully the cat is black. No,
black and white.
black and white. All right. Yep.
Yeah,
Good.
yeah, black and white. So I don't know a lot about Norse history except what I've learned through pagan groups. And pagan
Hmm.
groups, and I'm speaking more of like online pagan groups,
Okay.
there's a real mixture of
Mm,
different mythologies and different belief systems and different, I don't know, what practices, I guess,
hmm.
and the spiritual practices of the Vikings. Some people have brought some of that up, not in great detail, but they were polytheistic.
Yeah. That's a
And
simple way to put it. Yeah.
well, I was trying to simplify things.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, that's okay. I was having a conversation with somebody about that very thing. That is our tendency, is to try to reduce something down and make it simplified so we can understand it better, and so we can communicate it to other people better.
Right.
But there is an element of Viking mythology that is also pantheistic. Okay, so
Okay.
pantheistic meaning everything is part of, the oneness of the universe, and everything is from the earth. And so even the idea of like Thor being the god of thunder,
Hmm.
and so he's thunder, he is the lightning, that element of it. And then, but yes, we personify these gods into physical form. And even, Thor is described not quite like the Marvel movies, the comic books, but he wields a hammer, but he has a red beard, and he's a little bit more vengeful than the Thor of the comic books. But they personified them. So then you have that polytheism element, but it kind of originates in a pantheistic way. So it's almost like a mixture of
Yeah.
polytheism and pantheism. And so, yeah, so I just think, just share that so that you can, consider both sides, or even just
Right.
know that it's, even though we say it's, polytheistic, maybe it's a hair more complicated.
Well, I'm sure it is. I
Yeah.
think everything that we reduce to language is more complicated.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yep. So, and just like talk about like how you said you discovered so many different like variations. Well,
Hmm.
there were, and so Viking culture. I do want to. This is where my research will go eventually, is to the migration of the Vikings, and so then where did certain elements develop, as they migrated. So if they originated well in Denmark to Norway, to Sweden, and then where does that all go, and then
Mhm.
what pockets do we see these different variations of belief? But you have 30 to 40 different gods. Now it
Yeah.
so happens that Odin and Thor and Loki have just become the most popular in modern culture, but there are so many
Right.
more. And it doesn't mean that every Viking or Norse believed in Odin as the ultimate God the Father type of figure. Uh,
Right.
so there is evidence that Odin's followers tend to be of the affluent community, the rich followed Odin, whereas
Okay.
Thor was the god, the chief god of the common man. And so, but then even beyond that, if you were a fisherman, you would have had, worshipped your god of the sea and things like that. And we even see that elements of that within the world that we live in, having specific gods. I can remember traveling in Europe, and there's Orthodox countries where the taxi drivers would have the patron saint of taxi drivers. So I
Hmm.
mean, we that tendency is there throughout history to identify someone who is your overseer for your specific trade, and the Vikings were no different.
Right. Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it makes sense in a way that a lot of people wouldn't think it makes sense, but it does. I mean, it's kind of like spirit guides in my world where you have
Mm.
spirit guides that help you with different things,
Okay. Okay.
so kind
Yeah.
of like that.
So what is a spirit guide? Just so I'm aware.
Okay. We all have spirit guides. We
Okay.
have one or two that comes with us when we're born. They kind of help guide us through life and for different things, but like your main spirit guide will match up with your personality.
Okay.
So I guess, is the best way to put it. I have spirit guides and if natives also have animal guides, like you were
Okay.
talking about.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's a lot of commonality in I'm going to use the word tribal, even though I don't know if
Mm.
that's used in the Norse pantheon or whatever, but there are a lot of things that are pretty similar. The way that they did like spiritual ceremonies with the sweats and
Mm.
the fire, the animal guides, that kind of thing. There's a lot of similarities there. At least that's as far as I've gone with it. That's what
Yeah.
I've seen.
Okay.
So, but as spirit guides are those who are with us through our lives and guide us. And sometimes we have protector guides. Sometimes we have guides who help us learn new things. I specifically asked for a technology guide because doing this, I needed some help,
I gotcha. Okay. Okay.
so it's kind of like that. You can ask for guides to help you with different aspects of your life.
Mhm. All right. Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
definitely, think throughout human history, you see those same types of patterns throughout
Mhm.
culture after culture. I mean, it's
Yeah,
really no different in that sense. Yeah.
right. The saunas and their saunas, I guess they're called saunas,
Uh-huh.
and sweat lodges are not all that different.
Right. Sure. Sure.
You
Yep.
know.
Yep. And there are different, you talked about the modern paganism, and that is rooted in Norse mythology. Um, there's a couple different variations. That they use the ruins, which is
Mhm.
the alphabet of, so when you hear the word ruin, you have to think it means alphabet. It's their
Yes.
letter system, but each letter had something significant tied to it, and so
Hmm.
there's this thought of the magical element of the ruins, and so
Hmm.
it can kind of be used interchangeably for the writing system and the magical system of the Norse, of the paganism. And then there are others that deal in chanting, and which I think you do see that some today.
Hmm.
But that's not those specific topics are not an area of expertise, not yet. I have had
Right.
brief conversations because it is fascinating.
Hmm.
And when it comes time to do an episode on the podcast of those, then I will, research it until I know, as much as I can.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. See, nice thing about having guests on my podcast is I don't have to research everything.
Yeah.
They bring their own research with
There
them.
you go. There you go. I might have to invite some guests.
People who specialize in different things. It's very
Yeah.
convenient,
Yeah.
but and it's also fun. Get to know people and have conversations and such. Um, I had another thought, and what was it? It was I know that there's a female god that's brought up
Freya.
Freya. Yeah.
Hmm.
What do you know about Freya?
Well, not as much as I should. I other than learning some of the gods. I mean, you have 30, sometimes 40 gods that you can
Yeah.
um, list from. But no, so I don't have a good answer for you on Freya, not yet. But again, that's where the podcast will take me at some
Mhm.
point, is to deep dive every god. And so the cool thing about the podcast is, I think, well, how many episodes could you do? Well, you can do 40 episodes just on the gods
Just on the
alone, just
gods.
an individual god, just take them one at a time, except that there are different elements of each of those gods that would, have multiple episodes, how they interact, and the way Odin appears in the sagas. I mean, he
Hmm.
appears in people's stories, to where he gives a sword that has magical powers and people fight over it, and then he circles back and now he's given a spear instead of a sword. And so, I mean, that's a whole episode in of itself. So Freya, I'll put her towards the top of the list, and I'll send you a link when we do it.
Engage your female listeners.
There you go.
Yeah, that's really cool. I love learning about all of this stuff, and I love hearing people tell stories about it, especially when they're really sparked by it.
Mm, yeah.
It just makes it
Yeah.
so much more interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and so one thing I've found is interesting. There's popular video games out there. Skyrim is one that everybody is aware of, whether they've played it or not, and so that really tries to put you into kind of a medieval, almost Viking Norse, world. Obviously, it's make believe world, but there are some amazing parallels in there with the Viking culture and paganism, the ruins. I mean, there's a lot there that you can
Oh yeah.
subliminally learn. And we led with talking about the Draugr. Well, that's one of the things you encounter in the game are the Draugr.
I knew
Uh,
I'd heard that before. My
yeah,
son was big into Skyrim for a long
yeah.
time.
Well, there's
Yeah.
also this element in the game where you can get in with this faction that's, they look like Vikings, I suppose. Everybody looks like a Viking to me in that game,
Yeah.
but
I
they're
agree.
shapeshifters, and you can become yourself in the game a werewolf. So, sorry, spoiler alert for anybody that
Hmm.
hasn't played yet. But yeah, you can become a werewolf where you shapeshift at different times into this wolf. And that is actually a thing that is part of Viking lore,
Oh,
is
that's
that
awesome.
they had shapeshifters where you could turn into um, basically a wolf human. So again, you think about it, Vikings had uh, zombies before zombies were a thing, and they had werewolves before werewolves were a thing, right? Before
These things
movies
had to
like
come somewhere from
yeah,
somewhere in
movies like
popular
Silver
culture.
Bullet that
Yeah.
ruined me as a child. Um, but yeah, so I find that it's fascinating that
Yeah.
Vikings were ahead of Hollywood in that sense.
Oh, way ahead of Hollywood. Well, how many descendants from Vikings are writing this stuff?
Yeah, that's
Probably a
true.
lot.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, or just you pick something up, you hear something, you read a saga, and then you're inspired. It's
Hmm.
like wow. And so, I
Yeah.
mean, that's really, I mean, I am inspired in maybe a different way but to produce, history in an engaging way. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting that you brought up Skyrim. It's one of the few video games I can stand to watch people play
Ah, yeah,
because it's not shooting and it's not,
sure.
I mean, it's still warlike, but it's, I don't know, feels more authentic than a lot of other
Uh-huh.
games.
Yeah, yeah.
Obviously, I have a family full of gamers.
Ah,
I'm like I'm all Candy Crush and Words with Friends, but they're all into those games. You know?
yep. I understand. We've got a few of those in our house too.
Yep. Um, that's interesting though that you brought that up because I could see a lot of connections
Hmm.
to actual history
Yeah.
in that game. So yeah.
Yeah. Very subtle nods to the Vikings and to the Viking mythology and the Viking lore. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I think I'm going to check out the names of the people who wrote the games.
Ah, there you go.
It's a possibility that they're
See,
probably
see where their roots are. Yeah,
see where their roots are. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. Because people do what interests them. And so
yeah,
if that interested people, there must have been a reason.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, the Vikings definitely in pop culture are a fascinating group for everyone, and so
Mhm.
that leads to a little in areas some misconceptions. Like even the term Viking, we're using Viking, which is fine. For me, I'm not bothered by it, but some historians or some people might be bothered by using the term Viking in a general sense, whereas just so that you're aware and so that your listeners are aware that Viking was actually the name of the occupation.
Okay.
Okay, so it's more proper to say the Norse or the Danes or
Hmm.
and Icelandic, people. I don't know what specifically they're called, but Viking was what you did when you were raiding, when you were going out and you were
Okay.
raiding and you were fighting. So there are some television shows that do portray that accurately, where they don't refer to them as Vikings; they refer to them as Danes,
Hmm.
which the Danish Vikings were fairly aggressive and they were responsible for a lot of raids. So were the Norwegian Danes, but or the Norwegian Vikings. But yeah, Viking was more of the what do you call it? The action. This is what they did. So
Okay.
we've just kind of taken that and just use it as a general term. That's who they were. Well, no, they were probably farmers and fishermen and blacksmiths and just normal people. But then they would go on raids, and when they did that, they became like pirates, in their
Mhm.
ship and pillaging and plundering, and that was when they were considered Viking. So
Okay.
yeah,
I had a feeling it was probably a title of what they were doing.
yeah,
You know, I have seen or read somewhere, I don't know, sometime recently that anthropology or archaeology has been finding bones of Vikings who were female,
yes,
and that
yeah.
there were a pretty good number of female Vikings.
Yes, yeah. So that's something I think we'll continue to discover. But yes, there is evidence of women being buried with weapons and shields. So again,
Hmm.
kind of that idea of you want to bury the dead with everything that they're going to need for the afterlife, so they don't
Right.
come back and haunt you. And so, yeah, to find a female Viking buried with treasure or with swords and shields suggests that this woman would have been a warrior of some sort. So
Hmm.
yeah, I to me that's the most exciting thing that maybe is yet to be discovered, because it feels like it's a very male dominant occupation, I guess. But yeah, so there's it's cool when we get to bring out the other side of the culture. Now that being said, Viking women, again using that term just to generalize the whole people group, but they were significant. That is something that the Viking what people, I guess, they treated women as equal. So that's from early stage. So men had their role, they would go raiding, but women were the economic force behind the Vikings. So a big part of Vikings and Norse history is trading. And so it was very common for the women to be the CEOs, more or less, of the house, of the business. Uh,
Hmm.
and then the men were kind of the more or less become the gophers to go out and get the goods so that the women can distribute this and run this business so that the family could survive. So yeah, I mean, women had a significant role. They could own property. They could divorce their husbands if they decided to. So yeah, there's a lot, I think, that even in our modern age where we want to, like, hey, there needs to be some equality here, right? Well, we
Hmm.
could go back and look at how the Vikings handled that, and maybe get a little inspiration and lift up, in equal ways, both groups. So
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's I don't know. That's kind of the way it was with my grandparents too. Like grandpa went out and got the stuff and grandma took care of everything.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So um, I get that part of it too. I feel like a lot of that was lost with the onset of Christianity.
Mm,
Like that's where that whole thing switched, as far as, but I mean, I born and raised in the United States. I haven't really experienced firsthand other cultures.
hmm.
And I feel like if I went to Norway, it would be very different than what I'm used to here.
Yeah.
I
Hmm.
feel like if I went to Denmark, it would be very different than what I'm used to here. And I think it would be very enlightening in many ways because those societies, even though they adopted Christianity, I don't feel like they adopted as much the subjugation
Mm,
of
sure,
what.
because they already had a good path that they were on that
Right.
worked very well. Yeah, and then
Yeah.
it'd be very difficult to then take away those rights at that point. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think the Christianity element of Norse history is fascinating. I currently constantly pondering how and why did it sweep so fast. Over the whole entire thing, right? I mean,
Right.
why was it embraced so readily? And so maybe it has to do with political power, and that's where I think that a lot of corruption, even because I think that if you met Christians, they would say that that's not how it's supposed to be. But just during the medieval times, that there was just so much corruption that crept in, and then using the church as the reason for allowing the corruption is just nasty, it's dirty, it's gross. So um yeah, so I at some point I will deep dive that element of things. But I can tell you that just from looking, and like you referenced the paganism, that's there is nobody appreciates what Christianity did to the Vikings. It's like almost like you robbed us of our ancestry, you robbed us of the tradition, and so
Hmm.
maybe that's, so I don't know. I'm going to refrain until I research a little bit deeper. I don't want to be emotional about it. I understand where
Right.
people are coming from, but yeah, so we'll
Yeah.
see. It'll be an interesting journey when we get there.
That would be an interesting deep dive study for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I can't wait for your podcast.
Well,
Like,
I can't either. So yeah, I've got my goal today is to try and get one or two episodes recorded, because I'd like to get them polished and sounding good, and cut out you know all the ums and uhs and all those things that happen naturally. I mean, this format is great. It's a conversation and it's engaging, and so but to the what I want to put out is something that people can listen to, and it's professional and polished, and it's one, storytelling, but also it's history and it's accurate. So
right.
I'm just thinking about that, where like going back to school, like i I don't think I learned anything from history. I mean, hardly anything when I was in school, because it was just so boring, and it didn't mean anything to me. It didn't connect to me. How does this even matter? Why am I learning about these people? So it wasn't until I got into college where I started to develop a fascination with history, and maybe even seeing how, oh, it's actually is woven
Mhm.
through history. It's still here today, and it influences us in ways. But to me, you're going to remember much better when you tell a story,
Hmm.
right? When we tell stories, then we remember. And so if we can tell the story and mix in the historical facts, now we're learning something. And now
Right.
we're going to remember those facts because they're tied to that image. So yeah, so I'm looking forward to being able to produce it in that way.
That's exciting. I will be downloading episodes to listen to on the plane.
All right, awesome. Well, the trailer is out. I did produce a trailer just to give
Awesome.
people a little taste of what the podcast will be like, what it'll sound like, and so it's up on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and wherever people do podcasts.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Excellent. I'm really excited about it. Was
yeah.
there anything else you wanted to share with us about your podcast or about anything that you wanted
Well,
to know?
um, it's been great, and just having this conversation and being able to just share, random things about Vikings and some of the paranormal elements. So you inspired me to dig deeper. So both the Draugr episode and the Valkyrie episode were inspired by knowing that I was going to come on your show,
Cool.
and so I wanted to research and be ready with a little bit of paranormal elements. And so, and like, all right, we're going to put these in the first 5 episodes. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're
Um,
welcome.
yeah,
Glad
yeah,
I could help.
yeah. So, but yeah, just I would encourage people if they're curious to just listen to the trailer that's there on Spotify and see if it's something that they would enjoy engaging with. And yeah, we're gonna have fun and looking forward
Awesome.
to it.
And one more time, what is the name of the podcast?
Viking Legacy and Lore. So you can
Awesome.
find us anywhere, TikTok, Instagram. It's Viking Legacy and Lore. If you search the podcast, Viking Legacy and Lore, it'll pop
Okay.
up. So yeah.
Great. Great. I will let my brother Olaf know about that.
Oh wow, that's a very Viking name. Wow.
Yes. That is his name. Yep.
Yes. Yeah, man, that's a kingly name.
That
So
is a kingly name.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. All right.
Yep, absolutely. Well, thank you again so much, Stephen, for being on. And I look forward to listening to your new podcast.
Well, thank you. It was a pleasure. And yeah, again, thank you for the inspiration of the episodes.
You're
Appreciate it.
welcome. All right. Take care. See you again
You
next
too.
time on
All right.
Paramystic Podcast with Christina Bloom.